Okay, I think we're live and running. We should be. Yep. Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome back to another Sunday live stream on My Left Eye. I'm your host Lefty. Hope you're very well tonight. Let us know how you're doing in the chat, which is now open. And if you've not subscribed to the channel already, please hit the button. You'll be able to join in the chat just 60 seconds later. Hope you're well. We're going to get started in a few minutes. Just going to wait for a few people to arrive in the chat, as always. I'm going to nip over to the fondue lounge for now. And while we wait for people to arrive, just another little reminder to hit the thumbs up on the stream. Really does help us reach a wider audience. Also hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future live streams as well as videos. If you're new to the channel, you're very welcome here, and if you're a returning viewer, a very warm welcome back. Do have a quick channel update that I'll be going into in a moment before we get on to articles, clips, etc. As always, quite a lot on this week. Lots to talk about. Keith himself is going to be coming up, of course. We're going to be talking about that Tory defection to the Labour Party and how telling that is for the current state of the Labour Party, for example. Also the latest on Gaza protests and demonstrations as they've been happening throughout the week, including some quite escalated ones which have turned a bit nasty both in the States and in Germany, worryingly. So I'm going to be touching on that, as well as other topics. We have the St. George's Day demonstration, as it were, which unsurprisingly turned awry. I'll be getting started with that one actually at the top of the show. Also going to be touching on a few other topics as well, so lots to get through, as always. And yet, if you've already subscribed and you're a regular viewer and you're enjoying the content, please do consider becoming a member on the channel. There's two great packages starting from just 99p. Very pleased to say that we've just reached a milestone with memberships. Got over 20 members now, 25 I believe. So thanks a lot for your continued support. If you've not checked out those packages already, please do so. You can get some exclusive perks, including live stream perks, static emojis, exclusive videos, exclusive live streams, and a whole bunch more. Please do consider supporting the channel in that way. And if you're listening live, just a reminder that super chats are open. Promise to read out all of the super chats. If you're watching on a replay, you can hit the super thanks, or please consider going to our Buy Me a Coffee page. Links are in the description of this video, as well as for the channel. And just again, very warm thanks to those of you who've joined recently, and for those of you who've renewed your memberships as well. So yeah, if you're listening live, there won't be any adverts during the stream. There's no mid-roll ads, as they're known. I've had a bit of a change in monetization recently. It's been up and down for those of you who've been following the streams recently. Unfortunately, I've had another demonetization on the live stream from PMQs on Wednesday. I think I know why that was, though. I did use a clip from the New Statesman before we got on to the PMQs itself. That's probably what's done it. So yeah, if you're watching live, there will be an ad at the start, but none during the stream. If you're watching on a replay, there will be ads during the stream. Just a quick update on those changes as well. as always, let us know how you're doing in the chat. Keep it polite and cordial as always. I'll do my best to keep my eye on it, I should say. Don't have any moderators at the moment, but I will do my best to keep my eye on what's happening in the chat, whether you're responding to a clip or article or just having a chat amongst yourselves. Why not? This is a good place to get connected and show solidarity with fellow socialists, and a happy Socialist Sunday as well, I should say, to everybody joining us this evening. Get started in just a minute. And yeah, we're back to the regular time of 7 PM, on a little later than usual last week. Should be sticking with this 7 PM for now. Right, let's get into some articles and clips, etc. That's all for now from Keith. Although we will be catching up with one or two things that he's been up to during the week, shall we say. Okay, just a moment. I'm going to queue up a clip here. Just bear with me. I thought I already had this on the list.
Emotionless greeting.
So we're going to start with
Back
Larry and
from
Paul.
the dead, or at least
recent videos. Had them on before. So yeah, this is going to be one of the latest from them. For those of you who don't follow Larry and Paul, really great parody channel on YouTube. Just take that back to the start. Okay, so this is the latest from them.
Emotionless greeting. Back from the dead, or at least from an abortive attempt at a media career on Talk TV. Bitter sniff. Aware that while everyone hated me during the pandemic and thought I was a smug, insufferable prick, the fact I'm now surrounded by a wonky cabinet of incompetent, racist, twatty teenagers makes me look positively statesmanlike. Adopting wide Rishi robot arms and Rishi Richter's grin, flapping while announcing tired new policy of the week, some unenforceable, expensive and cruel way to punch down on the poor, smelly, homeless or brown. Let's be honest, ideally all four. Weird emotional step change move to defensive thumbs, rejecting calls that we're doubling down on a policy that was only ever designed as a distraction by a giant cum-filled haystack. Talking about the general election despite not calling one, insisting Labour has no plan and that we are sticking to our plan. Whatever that is. Taking question from journalist.
Deep sigh.
Desperately clinging on to power face.
On behalf of everyone, asking when you're calling this fucking election.
Laughing like a weirdo, claiming I've been clear about this when I really haven't been clear, not answering the question
Pointing
at all.
out that the question hasn't been answered, finally learning to call you out on your doublespeak bullshit after a decade and a half of inexplicably allowing you to wank on in interviews without challenging it.
Quite shocked, actually.
Couldn't give a toss. Moving on, big, sharp intake of breath. Asking you valid questions about a racist prick businessman who's donated loads of money to your party, or the MP who hires Brazilian rent boys, asks them if they can score drugs and embezzle campaign funds, or the Tory party grandee who's evaded hundreds of millions of pounds in tax, or massive conflicts of interest involving awarding government contracts to best mates or family members.
Interrupting. Taking petulant offence to valid questioning despite being an elected official and apparently a public servant who's answerable to you. Stalling for time. Oh look, Northern Working Class Lady Labour MP has done a slightly wrong thing.
Whoa! Totally ignoring all the corruption I just listed, and then going on about that story until my head explodes, seemingly incapable of talking or writing about anything else for weeks.
Good boy. Warm thanks.
Right, what about her tiny amount of tax? It should be on the front pages for weeks.
Turning back to camera, job done. Delighted to see we're delivering on Rishi's promise of integrity, professionalism and accountability at every level. Sly winky nod. Sincere. Thank you.
Yeah. Brilliant stuff from Larry and Paul. Very Brexian, that. Very good parody, of course. Just while they're on the topic of three-part slogans, bit of a change up to PMQs last Wednesday. It was the deputies in place of Sunak and Starmer. We did make an amendment to the Stop the Boats game and the I'm the Lawyer game as it is now. The running count on how many times Sunak and Starmer mention those things respectively. But the deputies were there in place, so we got a 0-0. But then during the week, Sunak had been on TV and mentioned the phrase 100 times while he made while he did the press conference that Larry and Paul are parodying here. So we just missed out there. But they were bang on the money there with what they're saying. All of a sudden, some elements of the media have seemed to notice that the Tories have been crap for the last 15 years. But they're the ones who've been enabling them for so long. So it's very much a case of too little too late from the mainstream press. And yeah, that was very atypical of how Sunak's responding to his critics and the Tories in general. So just wanted to share that clip with you there. That's Larry and Paul with the Real Daily Briefing. So I'm going to dive into an article now. Just quickly get onto this. So there was this demonstration on St. George's Day, of course. It all turned very foul very quickly. These nationalist right-wingers show up to celebrate, well, something that they generally can't describe. They can't tell people what they're celebrating or what they had to be proud of in terms of us as a nation at the moment. And it just, always seems to be full of gammons and racists. And it led to some arrests, unfortunately. 6 people were arrested, including suspicion of animal cruelty after a police horse was targeted in Westminster. That's just awful and so out of order. We saw last year as well a large crowd of troublemakers just there to create confrontation. And it's pretty tragic to see, really. Pretty tragic. So 3 have been held on suspicion of assaulting an emergency worker, 1 for suspected assault and 1 on suspicion of being drunk and disorderly. Surprise, surprise. The Met shared a video on Twitter which seems to show officers forming a cordon and a group pushing past it. Whitehall had to close traffic while the situation was resolved. Afterwards, a group gathered up opposite Downing Street, where there was also a large police presence. So, yeah, a lot of them are tanked up, drunk, just there to cause trouble. And it's hardly any surprise when you see people leading and spurring them on, such as this guy, Stephen Yaxley Lennon, aka Tommy Robinson. The Met Police posted a video just after 2 p.m. on Tuesday along with the message, "The event is not due to start for an hour and regrettably officers are already dealing with disorder. There is an area allocated for this event in Richmond Terrace. The group went past it and continued up Whitehall. When officers formed a cordon, and asked the group to turn around. They reacted by violently forcing their way through. Mounted officers intervened with horses to restore the cordon. So, I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with this guy, what he's all about, far-right, EDL type. He's been caught out before. He tries to stir up the right wing. He's very anti-immigration, obviously xenophobic, racist, all of the other nastiest tropes you could imagine. The article goes on to say an earlier post from the police said a number of people had been seen in the area wearing masks, and Section 60 AA order was in force in the boroughs of Lambeth and Westminster, giving officers the power to require the removal of face coverings. That's quite a new bit of legislation as well. Although a lot of people have pointed that out as being pretty irresponsible in the era that we live in, where we've had a pandemic, for example, and long COVID is still quite a thing. And who knows, hopefully we won't ever end up in a similar situation, but if we did do so, then that's pretty irresponsible legislation, although it's aimed at protesters. That's why it's cited that they've created these laws. Also, facial recognition technology is becoming a big thing in London as well. So it didn't last very long, but they, still managed to cause a stir. And it's just, sort of tragic to see these people consider themselves patriots, but they totally reject the idea of multiculturalism. And unfortunately, these are the kind of people that Rishi Sunak's trying to pander to win votes, as well as Starmer. Sorry, I do get the two mixed up. Quite easy to do so these days. We are going to go on to talk about the similarities between the two of them as well now, as we look at this recent defection, the latest Tory to step down. The most recent one that was probably spoken about quite a lot in the press was 30p Lee's defection to Reform UK. This time around they've defected to the Labour Party, and that just goes to show how similar they are. How many times are we going to hear Keir Starmer say that he's offering real change for the people of this country as we come up to the next election, whilst at the same time mimicking the Tories, copying the policies like for like, and welcoming them with open arms in this case. So let's just head into an article about that. I've got some clips as well coming up. So Dan Poulter, who's also a doctor, he's a GP, he still works part-time as a GP, as well as being a Member of Parliament as well. There he is. And this is a story that just broke over the weekend. I think I'll play this little video in a moment. Just go through one or two points in the article. I won't read through the whole thing. Laura Kussenberg did an interview with him. We're going to be checking some of that out in just a moment. So as I said, he's part-time, works as a doctor, but the reasons he's given for moving over to Labour from the Tories are just, it's enough to leave you dumbfounded. He's woken up one morning and realised that the Tories aren't good in terms of providing money for public services, and where they've made cuts to the NHS. He's had some sort of very late stage epiphany after a decade and a half. Now, before I go into a few points from this article and the clip, I just want to let you know, or remind you in case you already did know, about Dan Poulter. He's basically the Tory who facilitated the sale of the country's plasma reserves, which are used in blood transfers, etc., from the NHS to a private company for the princely sum of £200 million. So, not only is he hypocritically pointing out that he's moving over to Labour for those reasons, he's certainly had a hand in helping to destroy the NHS. And that's something which is in Labour's remit as well. Moving over to them just shows how things are going to not just stay the same but get worse, probably, under Wes Streeting as Health Secretary. The Tories have decimated the NHS. They've been doing that since day one, having been in for 15 years. And not even things like leaving the European Union and how that affected already short staffing levels in the NHS and just exacerbated that. It's it beggars belief. But then you can see here he also says, under the Conservatives, we're raising NHS funding to a record 165 billion a year, helping it recover from the effects of the pandemic and drought. They keep bringing up the pandemic as an excuse, as though we're the only country in the world that suffered from the pandemic. Anyway, it says, and driving forward, its first ever. Even as he's heading out of the door, he's doing a party political broadcast for the Tories as he's leaving. Unbelievable. Ordin Allfather, thanks for joining us in the chat. Hope you're well tonight. So, of course, there's not going to be a by-election over this. But he says he's going to sit as a Labour MP until the general election and then stand down. So what is the point? What is the point? Even if he retains his seat under Labour, he's planning on standing down. Well, then surely there'd have to be a by-election. But, yeah, try looking for any logic, and you'll you'll find yourself often empty-handed. But just a little bit about Labour's plans for the NHS. As I said, you're just going to continue to see further privatisation. Starmer and Wes Streeting have done nothing to separate themselves from the Tories on this. So he's a consultant psychiatrist. He served as health minister under the coalition from 2012 to 2015, so he's obviously more than aware of when the Tories started to implement cuts. Let alone we forget what was it, they promised 40 new hospitals? How long ago was that now? That was years ago. So not only has all that damage gone on, we've had the damage done from leaving the European Union in terms of staffing, as I said, but also what Matt Hancock did to the NHS and the tremendous strain it was under during the pandemic wasn't enough to open his eyes, but now all of a sudden he's woken up and smelled the coffee. So he's just tried to tell us that the Tories have given record funding, but then he suggests that the party has stopped valuing public services, saying the difficulty for the Conservative Party is that the party I was elected into valued public services. It's got to be having a joke. It's got to be having a laugh there. It had a very compassionate view about supporting the more disadvantaged in society. I don't know what planet he's living on, but that's the opposite of the truth. It couldn't be further from the truth. I think the Conservative Party today is in a very different place. Well, yeah, it has been getting worse and worse and worse ever since they got in. But it has been happening since the start. And you can't play devil's advocate or pretend to ignore that. Come on. So there was no animosity towards Rishi Sunak, but the country needed a general election as soon as possible, adding that Labour and Keir Starmer could be trusted to run the NHS in the country. No, certainly not. Yeah, we still don't know when the election's going to be. Obviously, probably sometime this autumn, October, November-ish. That's what it could be looking like at the moment. So it doesn't really matter if he's planning on stepping down. At the end of the day, it's not really going to be a seat to keep your eye on at the election. Let's just hear from him in this interview with Laura Kussenberg.
I found it increasingly difficult to look my NHS colleagues in the eye, my patients in the eye, and my constituents in the eye with good conscience. And I feel that the NHS deserves better than it has at the moment in terms of how it's run and governed. The party I was...
Did he not want to have a word with Matt Hancock when he was it, or has he not spoken to any of the health secretaries? Has he been living under a rock for the last 15 years? Come on, man.
Elected into valued public services. It had a compassionate view about supporting the more disadvantaged in society. I think the Conservative Party today is in a very different place. Its focus is not on delivering or supporting high quality public services.
So he's not too quick off the mark that these things are only just coming into his consciousness. But yeah, I think this meme that I saw on social media earlier sums it up more than I could. The NHS isn't safe with any Tory, including these ones. Streeting, Starmer and Reeves. The quotes attributed to former Prime Minister John Major very early on in the Tories' tenure when they took over in 2010 is just as you could attribute it just as much to the three people you see before you now. Absolutely. Be about as safe with Labour as a pet mouse would be with a hungry python. I think words to that effect. I might be slightly paraphrasing. And that's what's going to happen. What do you say, Rachel?
I found it increasingly difficult to look my NHS colleagues in the eye, my patients in the eye, and my constituents in the eye with good...
Another quick note on that. It's been pointed out on social media as well that I've seen over the weekend. He's known as the invisible man in his constituency, which is often the case with Tory MPs. I know a lot of people locally in the region and I've heard stories from on a national level as well. Anybody who tries to get the attention of the Tory MP, whether it's writing to them, emailing them, visiting the constituency office, they're often not there, they don't respond. They will immediately just block anyone who critiques them on Twitter, for example, or whatever. And he appears to be no different. Maybe that's why they call him the Invisible Man. He's saying that he can't look his constituents in the eye, but he's been ignoring them, what, for the last 15 years anyway. So what's the difference there?
Conscience. And I feel that the NHS deserves better than it has at the moment in terms of how it's run and governed. The party I was elected into valued public services. It had a compassionate view about supporting the more disadvantaged in society. I think
the wealth gaps now are, you know, always at an increasingly record level between lowest and highest earners. That's utterly ridiculous. That's utterly ridiculous. The Tories have created that and perpetuated that. They didn't come into government 5 minutes ago. It's been a decade and a half. So that's absolute trash from Dan Poulter. Absolute BS. Not even going to swallow that. But Wes Streeting was certainly rubbing his hands together, that's for sure. And he had this to say about the situation. But, again, they've painted themselves into a corner. The Labour Party have. They can't say that they're going to bring real change from the Tories at the same time as making statements like this and welcoming former Tory MPs with open arms.
It's, I think, a sign of both the state of the Conservative Party, but also the strength of the Labour Party that we're...
No, I think it goes to show what a sorry state the Labour Party's in, not about the strength of the party itself. It's far more a case of people being done with the Tories than really genuinely getting excited about Labour. All that they're banking on is the who else are you going to vote for narrative that's spun by, you know, the Alistair Campbells and Peter Mandelsons of this world. But how Labour have aligned themselves so closely with the Tories also goes to re-emphasise that. They don't set themselves apart, just hope that the collapse in the Tory vote will mean that they're going to tiptoe, not even just like saunter over the line.
attracting someone like Dan Poulter over to the Labour benches before the general election arrives, and I hope that sends a signal to those disaffected Conservatives who are looking for a political home that they're welcome to join us in Labour, because we want to unite our country.
Wow. It beggars belief that a high-profile member, you know, Shadow Health Secretary, that Wes Streeting is, within the Labour Party, could make such a statement. Could you imagine what would have happened if this had been a defection when Jeremy Corbyn was in charge? What would the press have had to say about that? Obviously, they give Starmer a much easier ride, the same way as they do with the Tories. Cussenberg herself is notorious for giving the Tories an easy ride, and helped to facilitate and perpetuate those false narratives against Corbyn also, back before the last general election. It beggars belief that this is the current state of the Labour Party. It's no wonder that they've lost members in the hundreds of thousands ever since Starmer took over. It's no wonder that people are disaffected with the party. Not just how they've aligned themselves with the Tories, but what Starmer has done to completely rip any democracy within the party to shreds, with deselections, parachuting in his chums in the meanwhile, attacking members on the left of the party, also those who have been supporting Palestine whilst criticising Israel, and this purge on the left, and also on anti-Zionist Jews as well. So it's a sorry state of affairs. It's a sorry state of affairs.
The challenges are so great. We've got to bring our country back together to tackle the state of our economy, the state of our public services, and the threats in this really dangerous and volatile world that we find ourselves in.
But politics...
This guy is going to sell the NHS up the river. He really is. He's going to continue privatisation. The only reason he managed to make himself look good on Question Time during the week was the fact that the Tory who was on the panel made a complete and utter arse out of himself by not even realising that Rwanda and Congo were two different countries. To much ridicule from the audience. And that was an open goal for Wes Streeting, which he proceeded to take. And then the next minute, he's saying that Tories are welcome in the Labour Party. Keep your story straight, Wes. So, these words will come back to haunt him, believe me, if Labour get into power after the next election. We're going to see more of the same. Sell-offs, privatisation, people are going to get ripped off. We don't want an American insurance-style system, insurance-based system. We need a socialist system, paid and funded by national insurance contributions and taxation.
Is though very tribal to many people. It's often something they feel in their gut. And he's the second Conservative after Christian Wakeford in 2022 who's come across with the Labour Party. You're voting with the Tories in Edinburgh to try to sink the SNP government. I mean, some Labour members, some Labour voters watching might think, oh, it's all a bit cosy, isn't it? They're not quite comfortable with it.
Well, firstly, I don't agree with your characterisation of Scottish Labour's position in relation to the Scottish Government. Of course, we've got no confidence in the First Minister of Scotland.
I'll be touching on that shortly. This, in Scotland, a lot of the other parties have turned their back on the SNP and trying to they have forced a vote of no confidence. I'll be coming on to that in a moment, but that's very much a political move. It's a tactical move. I think that Streeting, as well as Starmer, are more than aware that if they're going to absolutely trample the Tories at the next election, they're going to have to win Scottish votes, but I'll come on to that shortly.
Of course, we've got no confidence in this SNP government. Look at the chaos and division. It is like, from my vantage point in Westminster, remarkable parallels between the implosion of the SNP and the state of the Tories. But also, we want to build a big tent. We want to make sure that people in this country who are looking for a party that's serious about turning Britain's challenges around, to know that they can come in. Because if we win the next election, yes, we've set out a big agenda on the NHS, this week on transport, Keir Starmer.
No. They've not. And everything that they do say, they roll back on, they do a U-turn on, they renege on. It's just the same old story every time. That's all that's happened since Starmer took over.
Commitment to protect the triple lock today in pensions. But when it comes to tackling the big challenges, we've got to see government, business and civil society working together. So it's great that we've got...
Well, no, Wes. One of the problems in society at the moment is how it's very difficult to differentiate business from politics. The House of Commons is just full of business types. And that's another reason why you just hear boardroom talk all the time, coming from Labour and the Tories. Everyone has these private business investments, and that has more influence in how they vote in the House of Commons than wanting to look after the constituents. He knows that, but that's one of the main problems with society. That's one of the main problems with the system of government that we have at the moment, and the lack of accountability. There are endless examples of nepotism within Parliament, within the system, as well as corruption. And we saw that a lot during the pandemic, as we have done before and since. But Streeting's saying he wants to create this big tent, whatever he means by that. I'm just assuming he means that they're only trying to win right-wing votes, whether it's neoliberals all the way to the far right. He doesn't care. He doesn't care.
Got Richard Walker, the chairman of Iceland, former Conservative, saying back Labour for business. It's great that we've got Nick Bowles, who advised David Cameron on preparation for government, saying, look, Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves are a serious team with answers.
So yeah, case in point. Labour was a party established of workers in solidarity, unions in solidarity, fighting for workers' rights, whether it's wages, working hours, safety, public holidays, all of these other things. And these are things that were hard fought for over the centuries. They really were. And now Labour have ditched those sentiments, they've ditched those ideals, and they just want to represent the bosses, they want to represent the businesses, they want to try and squeeze as much out of workers as possible, which is the exact opposite of why they were established as a party by Keir Hardie in the first place. I think he'd be absolutely disgraced to see the current state of the Labour Party if he were alive today. Absolutely disgraced. And again, that was a very telling statement from Wes Streeting. But he also mentioned this situation with the SNP, who have obviously a massive majority in Scotland. Labour would pretty much need to win votes in Scotland if they're going to have a massive majority in the next election, as I did say, but also other parties have banded together against the current leader of the SNP, Humza Yousaf, and called for a motion of no confidence. Despite that, though, Humza Yousaf said that he won't stand down and he wants to make minority government work, even if he stays in and the other parties do start to vote against the SNP in Parliament. So we'll have a quick look at that. Just have a look at an article first, and then I've got a clip to follow. Yeah, let's have a quick look at the clip.
I'll be writing to all of the party groups, all of the party leaders in the Scottish Parliament, asking them to come to meet with me, because we have to make minority government work. That's the reality. We have minority government now. Let's make it work. It depends, of course, on the government, but it also depends on the opposition playing their parts. And of course, Ash Regan will be included in that series of letters.
But she's specifically asked for some things. What do you say to them? Can you deliver them for her?
With the greatest respect, I'm not going to be having those discussions with you or on the camera with the BBC. I'll be having those discussions with each of the party leaders and those who represent the various party groups in the Scottish Parliament directly with them.
You cancelled a speech in Glasgow to come here and make this announcement. Doesn't that smack of a desperate attempt to get the Greens, who you've just kicked out, back on board?
What it does is, of course, demonstrates that we're delivering on the priorities of the people. You ask people about housing, and it's one of the top issues that comes up on the doorstep. And I'm announcing £80 million for affordable housing to bring stock back into use. I think that's a great use.
It's not the people you need to convince, though, it's the politicians.
Look, I will leave the opposition to do the game playing, to do the naked political.
Well, I don't think that the question that was just put to him is entirely accurate. No, it's not the politician. Obviously, if he does want to be in coalition with other parties, yeah, he does have politicians to convince. But ultimately, it's the people of the country who he represents.
Opportunism, if that is what they wish to do, what I'll be focused on is the priorities of the people, and that includes, of course, affordable housing.
But whatever happens here, won't it be the case that even if you survive through your own actions, you will be weaker, you will effectively be, to use the cliche, in office but not in power?
No, I don't agree with that at all. Minority government is tough. I was a minister in minority government 2016 to 2021. It's not easy. You've got to fight for the issues that you believe in. I will do that. But also it's incumbent, not just on the government, but also on the opposition, not to try to just frustrate the process, not to just play games, but actually in good faith act so we can deliver on the priorities of the people.
But the whole point here is you've insulted the Greens by chucking them out in this manner, and you previously insulted Ash Regan by saying basically she wasn't any good. Isn't that just complete political madness to try to think that they would want to work with you in a minority government when you're so disrespectful to them?
Well, let me say that I believe that ending the Butte House agreement was the right thing to do, and I've heard obviously the anger, the upset from Green colleagues, and look, it wasn't meant, the actions I took yesterday wasn't meant to upset them, wasn't meant to anger them in the way that clearly has been communicated by them. That's why I'll be writing to Patrick Harvey, to Lorna Slater, to let's see if we can meet. I would urge them to apologise. Look, I will also.
He has kind of put himself in a bad position there, sort of booting the Greens away, but then at the same time he's going to have to go back to them, cap in hand, to try and make this minority government work, like he's been saying. Now, I'm all for Scottish independence. I should point that out as well. I think they don't get represented as much in the Union, and the reasons they cite for wanting to leave the Union are perfectly valid as far as I'm concerned. It is good to see that the Tories only have one seat in all of Scotland as well, but this could leave the door open for Scottish Labour, I think, and that's a worrying thing. Although hopefully, as is the case in Wales, Scottish Labour might be slightly more left-wing than English Labour under Starmer, but yeah, I'd hedge my bets where that's concerned. So this is quite a situation he's put himself in here. To his credit, you know, he has done a lot. He had to take over from Nicola Sturgeon, of course. Also part of this, these circumstances mean that he's going to have to form relationships with the Labour Party, which is led by Alex Salmond, of course, who's another former leader of the SNP. So these are the kind of relationships and coalitions he's going to have to hope work now. But that's going to be very difficult to do after he's, in the case of the Greens, as has been put to him here, where he's going to have to do that immediately after rejecting them. It might seem a bit rich.
Also speak to them directly about what happened
and apologise
and how it happened. But what I would say,
I'm so sorry, just to be clear, it sounds like you were saying you regret it and you're going to apologise to them.
no, I've said that I believe that ending the Butte House agreement was absolutely
you regret
the right
the way it was done.
Look again.
Do you regret the way it was done?
Forgive me. You're trying to put words into my mouth.
No, I want you to be clear.
Let me speak in my words, if you don't mind. In my words, let me say very clearly that I do understand, I empathise with their position, because I understand how they must be feeling. But that doesn't mean that two pro-independence parties that share so many values, so many policy priorities cannot and should not work together in a less formal arrangement, less formal than the Butte House Agreement.
Well, yeah, we're gonna have to see what transpires with this. The no confidence vote is going to be coming up next week, as the article points out as well. But is he a lame duck? Do you think the knives are out for Yousaf now? Let us know what you think in the chat. Lefty's Pragues, very warm welcome to the chat. Hope you're well this evening. Yeah, so he's going to write to opposition leaders, it says as well, including the Greens, to ask them to meet to make a minority government work. He said he hoped that they'll reconsider their position because there were a lot of issues, a lot of priorities that both the SNP and the Greens share, which is true. I don't think there's any hope of the Tories getting in Scotland. Fortunately, it's just are Scottish Greens going to perhaps make some gains at the next election? Could Scottish Labour? Who knows? It's been very solid in favour of the SNP for quite a while now. They've come a long way since they formed as a party. Just missed out on the referendum in 2014, of course, for independence. And they continue to point out that with that being the main issue, with the main policy of the party, that any vote for them should be considered as support for another referendum. So I'm not sure if he'll stay. The Tories obviously are saying that he needs to go. Douglas Ross, yeah, Douglas Ross. Wow, less said about him the better, but he has just pointed out that he says he failed Scotland, his government's in meltdown, and despite his blustery, he knows he's finished. Very dramatic words there from Douglas Ross. I think we have to take that with a pinch of salt as well. But that's Ash Reagan, who's also part of the Alba Party. She quit the SNP after losing to him in the party's leadership contest. That's quite an interesting twist. So they're another party that Yousaf's hoping to get on board. Would they manage to form a minority government and vote together in Parliament? Who knows? We'll have to see what the outcome of this vote of no confidence is. But you do have to give credit to his record, as I'm going to show you now. Since he took over as party leader. So he's increased Scottish child payment benefits to over 327,000 children in Scotland, who have a population of roughly 6 million. So that's a very great achievement there. He's supported 4,000 families with £12 million for year-round childcare. He's committed £500 million to create green jobs in offshore renewables. Obviously, Scotland's record on that is a lot better than here in England. They run their homes off of 80% renewable energy at the moment, and that's just another statistic which shows how seriously they take climate change as well. So they've invested £6.3 billion in social security, £19.5 billion in health and social care, and over £14 billion in local authorities. That's obviously something the Tories have failed to do. They've delivered a national council tax freeze, committed to a new deal for businesses, supporting investment in excess of £10 billion for the NHS pay bill, which has rewarded NHS staff in recent years during the cost of living crisis, which is, of course, just a poverty crisis, renamed and rebadged. They published 8 independent papers outlining how we can build a better Scotland with independence. He's used his platform to be a leading international voice for justice in Gaza, which we'll be going on to after we round up on this topic. Lots of protests going on, demonstrations, etc., as I said at the top of the show. But he's also worked with schools and women's organisations to tackle gender-based violence as well. And that is just within his first year, so he's not been in power for long. Obviously, the knives are out for Nicola Sturgeon, and now they're out for Yousaf. But we'll see what happens with this no confidence vote. If he does lose it, then obviously there'll be another party election, and he won't have to try and form this minority government. But let us know what you think about this in the chat. I know we do get viewers up in Scotland who've posted in the chat before and commented. Just before we move on, to take a look at those protests and demos and the latest news from Gaza, as I said, just a quick reminder, if you've not done so, hit the thumbs up button, notification bell. Please do subscribe to the channel if you're a new listener. That gives us a boost on the algorithm. Very warm welcome to all of you this evening. If you've been here before and rejoining us, Phil McCracken, welcome to the chat. Phil McCracken's one of our channel members. But yeah, the SNP are all bad apparently. That's if you go to your local Tory, if you can find them, if they will actually listen to what you want to say. I'm sure that they will inform you of just how bad the SNP really are. I remember actually speaking to politicians face to face around the time of the referendum, the Tories and Labour alike, and it's, you know, pretty obvious where their affiliations lie. There was a lot of BS going round at the time of the referendum, but that's another story. So yeah, you can also help support the channel, as Phil and others do, by joining our membership program. We've got 2 tiers starting from just 99p. Please do check those out. Great way to support the channel. Also, super chats are active, or super thanks if you're watching on a replay. And don't forget to check out the Buy Me a Coffee page in the channel description and on this video as well. Now, I've rendered quite a few clips from demos and marches, etc., to do with Gaza and a ceasefire. Obviously, there's been a lot going on over the weekend as usual. There's been another one in London, but also internationally. Also, some of them have been fantastic to see. It's been very difficult to sort of choose which clips to use, but I've hopefully put them in a decent order for us to go through. And I want to start with one in Spain, which was particularly visually impressive. Of course, Spain have recently acknowledged Palestine as a state in its own right, something we'd like to see the United Kingdom doing, and the United States of America as well, you know, although I'm sure you'd get pretty long odds on that at the moment. But other nations have, and Spain is one of the major nations that have shown support for Palestine. So let's have a look at this demo that happened over the weekend. I think you'll agree it's quite visually spectacular. They had a band and everything in terms of this staged event. I think this is really great. I'm very glad that I came across this clip on Twitter earlier. It's like a proms for Gaza, but a proms that just isn't full of people who probably vote Tory, banging on about an empire that doesn't exist anymore, and obviously did a lot of damage around the world, but something positive and something calling for peace in terms of, instead of, I should say, imperial dominance and power over another nation. So it's quite refreshing to see this being organised, as well as how the crowd are responding, and with that great band as well. Great scenes there, great scenes. So we'd like to see more of that. We'd like to see that spreading across the world, especially those with more political influence, shall we say, geopolitically, on Israel, to recognise them as a state and continue to show this solidarity and call out this awful occupation, humanitarian crisis and genocide that's been imposed on Palestine for so long now, and has unfortunately escalated so much in the last 6 months that we've seen all kinds of records broken in terms of civilian casualties, journalists killed, etc. Despite the fact that most of the forces that were in southern Gaza have pulled out, there continue to be daily attacks and people are still being killed in the hundreds. Recently it was discovered, sickeningly, that there were mass graves at the sites of former hospitals. Now that the bulk of the army has retreated north, people have managed to return to, well, not return to their homes, not return to their work buildings, etc. They've been razed to the ground, but they've returned to the ruins, and these awful things have been discovered, things that really would turn your stomach. I can't show any of the clips of that. Unfortunately, I don't want to break terms and conditions on the stream, terms of service, I should say. But yeah, things that really are too awful to describe. So they've found hundreds of people, unfortunately, and they've had their hands tied with zip ties, including children, and discovered these mass graves. So that's just one of the reasons why these protests, marches, demonstrations continue and increase in size and number. From Spain, I'm going to go over to Brussels now and see a demonstration outside of a train station there, where the protesters carried a huge Palestine flag and sang at the same time. Yeah, Phil, you're right. Look at all these violent thugs singing and hugging and calling for peace, you know. Shouldn't someone come and drag them away? While we're on that topic, I may as well come in here. A couple of other clips that I'm not going to use, but I'm sure you've heard of what's happened in the USA. We're going to be taking a look at Columbia University in a few clips' time as well, but also what's happened in Germany. And you've seen the police really getting heavy-handed and, you know, authoritarian, if I'm going to be more accurate in my description of what's going down there. The police have been out of order. They've been far too heavy-handed. We're seeing them attacking young women. We're seeing people literally being beaten on the ground for peacefully demonstrating. But that's not something that we'd like to see at all. I often get the sense of the sort of vibe that things that are going on at the moment really are dragging us back 90 years, you know, into the past. And we're seeing history repeating with countries clamping down on protest, people's free right to demonstrate and to meet in public, and voices being silenced as well. But the more that happens, the more solidarity we're seeing, the more we're seeing people coming together. People aren't going to be put off by the tactics of authoritarian governments and the right wing. People are only going to band together more. So that's something that I think we have to focus on, is the positivity within that, and how we're seeing demonstrations, marches persist and grow in number and grow in size.
2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Occupation no more. Occupation no more.
So that was the latest scene from Brussels. With, you know, I do like to keep everyone up to speed with what's happening across the world with the protests. We've seen them in every corner of the globe. You know, in the States, in Europe, in the UK, all across Australasia, everywhere. And it's clear where public opinion is on this matter. As the weeks and months go by, we're seeing Israel get more and more desperate with their propaganda, with their attempts to deny or try to deny what they're doing. You saw one of the latest examples of that was David Mensa's appearance on the news rounds. Done a clip about that. If you've not seen it already, please do check out some of our video content as well. And it's just pathetic, because people are opening their eyes now. The public are being made completely aware of what's going on, despite the best efforts of the mainstream media. And demonstrations and marches, of course, continue here in the UK, in London. Let's dive into, take a bit of a look at that now. This is the start of the march. Again, attended tens, probably, you know, into the hundreds of thousands of people as well in our nation's capital. So fantastic to see. I also heard that when the front of the march got to Hyde Park, which is where the speeches were taking place this time around, that the back of the march was still at Piccadilly Circus, just to show you the incredible volume of people, for those of you who know London. So the march was that long that even as the speeches were taking place, as the front of the march started to arrive in Hyde Park, people in Piccadilly Circus were still waiting to move along. So this is what happened when they got there anyway, in Hyde Park. I'm gonna see one or two brief clips of the speeches.
London, Britons, people of the world, friends, it's been more than 200 days. 200 days of genocide, of ecocide, of ecocide, of femicide, of murdering and maiming 100,000 innocent Palestinians, including 14,000 500 children. It's been 90 days. 90 days since the International Court of Justice called on Israel to stop its mass murder and mass destruction.
Yeah, 90 days ago, and still the UK continues to arm and aid and abet a nation that has been legally proven in an international court to be carrying out a genocide. And as you can see, the banner there at the back of the stage, massive calls to stop arming Israel for any country that is. Obviously the United States of America come into that a lot as well. We'll be looking at some of the demonstrations over there shortly as well, like I said, at Columbia University. But it really is sickening and hypocritical that if any sitting Tory MP tries to say that they're trying to help people in Gaza, that is just completely false, and it's undone by the continued arms sales that this country is making to Israel. And Jeremy Corbyn and others have pointed out in Parliament, Zara Sultana, John McDonnell, for example, that we could find ourselves legally in a very, I don't want to say tricky position, that's nowhere near strong enough for the kind of things that we are aiding and abetting. We're not just on the wrong side of history, just how can we do that morally as a country? How can we see our taxes going towards things like this? It's completely unjustified. Let's hear from one of the other speeches now. Just bear with. Let us know as well if you've been down to any of these demos. As always, like to hear from people who've been down there on the ground. I've not managed to be able to find myself at a protest in person for a couple of months or so now. I'm really, hoping to get back out there soon, and I'll be providing videos and interviews from them as well. But let us know if you've attended any of them recently and what your experiences have been, as always, in the chat or in the comments if you're watching on a replay.
7 months with one very simple message: not in our name. As a child, he survived the Holocaust in Budapest, Hungary. His experience of war and expulsion as a child led him to become a steadfast friend of the Palestinian people. We are so incredibly honoured to have him with us today, joined by 2 generations of his family. Please give the warmest possible welcome to Stephen Kapos.
My name is Stephen Kapos. I was 7 years old when the Holocaust reached my hometown, Budapest, Hungary. The German army marched in the...
Just quickly interjecting again. Stephen has appeared in clips on the live stream before and is a regular attendee of the marches. He's a Holocaust survivor, and he wears a sign around his neck on the marches to point that out as well. And as he says, he knows an occupation and a genocide when he sees one, having survived one himself. And there have been quite a few clips of things that he said on marches and this speech as well, going around social media over the weekend, so keep your eye out for those as well. But he always gives incredibly fantastic testimony, and to hear it from someone with such background as he does, with the story that he has in his personal experience and in his life, really does bring home just what's happening there in Palestine in 2024.
Spring of 1944, and suddenly all Jews like us were in mortal danger. Deportations were overseen by Adolf Eichmann, starting in the countryside and soon 400,000 were deported to Auschwitz. 15 members of my own family were among them, and they all perished. My father was taken to Belsen and Theresienstadt, but eventually he did return. We all had to wear the yellow star and were concentrated into large yellow star-marked houses awaiting transportation. In response, we were sent into hiding with false names and papers into Swiss Red Cross-sponsored homes for Jewish children, pretending to be Gentiles and war refugees and war orphans. We were located near the Royal Castle area of Budapest, where the advancing front line, the fighting, swept through us.
They were overwhelmed. They were overwhelmed by right-wing forces, and we still, so many decades later, are able to get testimony from eyewitnesses who were there in those camps at the time. Is very moving. It's incredible. For those of you who know your political history, for those of you who know your military history, I always think that the best sources you can go to for information are the people that were there, not just those who have analysed and assessed them decades later without actually physically being there themselves. And it's very moving that people say that they're seeing history repeating. It's certainly disturbing when you hear the things described there in that testimony, that we're seeing the echoes of that again here in 2024, and let alone the great irony of the fact that in the 1940s the far right forces in Germany tried to eradicate an entire race of people, that now the state of Israel, which claims to represent all of the people in that religion, is doing unto others as historically was done to them as a religion. So again, just incredible that we can find ourselves in that situation in this day and age. And there has been a great amount of support for Palestine coming from the Jewish community, as we've pointed out several times before on the show. And those of you who saw our episode recently concerning Gideon Falter, his attempts to disrupt a march just last weekend as well, which went awry. If you've not seen that, please do check it out. But Zionists such as him, the far-right pro-Israel representatives, would deny the existence of Jewish people supporting Palestine, of course, despite the overwhelming evidence to the contrary. In Gideon Falter's case, he was on the news rounds and even tried to deny the existence of the Jewish bloc, who were out in force again this Saturday. But apparently Gideon Falter doesn't realise that we live in the communications age, that things like the internet exist, and that any crap that he tried to convince people of is very soon debunked and disproven, as we can see here.
Listen to the Jewish bloc!
Keir Starmer, you're a schmuck, listen to the Jewish bloc, and Rishi Sunak as well, who was saying at the beginning there. But the size of the Jewish bloc on the march is always really well attended, and it's not just members of London's Jewish community who've been speaking out as well. People have all over the world, and we've heard from Holocaust survivors as well, as you saw just there earlier. To deny their existence, to deny the fact that the majority of Jews are ashamed that these kind of atrocities are being carried out in their name. You know, we really do have to pay attention to that. The fact that so-called anti-Semitism is being used as a political football is a disgrace as well. Anti-Semitism is as disgusting and disgraceful as any other form of racism. However, to go along the lines of the boy who cried wolf, as it were, and to just try to label any critics of Israel as anti-Semitic is not only inaccurate, it's also quite a despicable tactic as well, which, as we always say, takes away from the severity of genuine cases of anti-Semitism, which are appalling and disgusting and do need to be rid from society, as well as all other forms as well, of course.
Listen to the Jewish mob! Netanyahu, you're a schmuck! Listen to the Jewish mob! Netanyahu, you're a schmuck! Listen to the Jewish mob! And Gvil, you're a schmuck! Listen to the Jewish mob!
They should have probably stuck a Gideon Falter in there as well. I'm not sure if they did. That was just 30 seconds or so from them, but there's a clip of an interview with someone on the block here now, so let's see what they had to say.
The idea that London is a no-go zone for Jews is just for the birds. It's rubbish.
These Jews have come out specially. There were 500 of us meeting outside Belgrave Square. We've all come here on purpose to show that that's rubbish.
Politicians are pushing it as just basically propaganda and to push their own narrative, to pretend that there isn't another voice that opposes the genocide going on in Gaza, to try and weaponise anti-Semitism to a degree.
We've been sold a false narrative, and I think it's really important for Jews everywhere to stand up and say, I'm not okay with this, and this is not being done for me.
Jewish people are not a monolith that all think the same. There's thousands of Jewish people who feel very comfortable in London and oppose the events in Gaza right now.
I've got a poster showing that I'm Jewish, that I'm supporting peace with Palestine, and I feel so welcome. People are really grateful that me and the rest of the Jewish bloc are out today. I've not experienced any anti-Semitism or anything that's made me feel uncomfortable.
There's always this talk about people feeling uncomfortable when people draw attention to what's happening in Gaza, but we're feeling uncomfortable about what's happening in Gaza.
There's genocide in Gaza.
Indiscriminate killing of men, women, children in Gaza.
As a Jewish person, as a human being, I know that using starvation as a weapon of war is immoral, it's illegal.
Having gone through
These are great testimonies, yeah, and what Israel are doing go against the very basic principles of Judaism in terms of preservation of life, for example, which is one of the fundamental principles of the religion itself. And people who practice the Jewish faith completely outraged. Wondergupta, thanks a lot for joining us in the chat. Yeah, I agree. It's really heartwarming to see so many getting informed about the occupation and seeing through the so-called anti-Semitism smears used against activists and journalists. Completely agree with that. It's becoming more and more transparent, as I said. The Israeli propaganda machine's getting more and more desperate. They've only got a very short, small narrative that they can push. That's clearly not washed. People are seeing past that, and now it's even being seen by the international courts, and that their excuses just were thinner and thinner as the weeks go along.
what we've gone through as Jews in history, we should understand what it's like to be persecuted.
We come from a people who have been targeted and persecuted and genocided in the past, and it's quite painful, I think, to feel like this is being undertaken in my name.
Judaism and Zionism are not the same thing.
Ethnic cleansing is fundamental to the Zionist project.
It certainly does not reflect my Jewish values, which are life for all people.
Even our own Foreign Secretary is talking about how frustrated he is with the Israeli government starving the Palestinian population.
Correct, yeah. He's referring to member of the House of Lords, now former Prime Minister David Cameron. And if even people like he are saying such things, then that really does go to show how far Israel have gone. The UK did, of course, well, I'm not sure if you do know this, formed a pact with Israel in 2021 to say that we would always support them as a state. But even agreements such as those, hopefully now, should come crumbling into nothing. Palestine needs to be recognised as a state. They need to organise a ceasefire. They need to organise the exchange of hostages, including those taken by Hamas on October 7th, but also the thousands of people held in Israeli prisons without charge, who've been arrested and abused in Israeli prisons over several decades now. And that's got to end by whatever means necessary. People just have to, this has to happen diplomatically. People have to get around a table, or whether it's the case that Israel are forced to act correctly under international law, it's just got to come to pass.
It has to end now.
Stop the genocide! Stop the genocide! Stop the genocide! Stop the genocide!
Yeah, that clip from Double Down News there. Another fantastic turnout in London, of course, and by members of the public, members of the Jewish bloc, all coming together in solidarity, and that's the main thing. That's what these continued marches and demonstrations are doing, not just here in the UK but internationally as well. Here's an example from Copenhagen.
This was happening again! This was happening again! Men popper ikke hospital! Men popper ikke hospital! This was happening again! This was happening again! Men popper ikke hospital! Men popper ikke hospital! Lad os gøre det helt klart! Lad os gøre det helt klart! Nej, det er også ikke bra! Nej, det er også ikke bra! Lad os stoppe det hykleri! Lad os stoppe det hykleri! Israel er en tyranni! Israel er en tyranni! Lad os gøre det helt klart! Lad os gøre det helt klart! Nej til Israels folkedrab! Nej til Israels folkedrab!
Another great turnout there. Yeah, again, tens and hundreds of thousands of people going down the road. Sorry, my Danish isn't particularly good, but I'm sure that the chants there were showing massive amounts of support for Palestine as always. So now I'm just going to go on to this situation at Columbia University in the States as well, just to briefly explain. There was a student sitting there. Several students were arrested. However, the show of solidarity and support for them also during the arrests were some of the aforementioned examples of the police using heavy-handed tactics, which was disgraceful and shameful to see. So members of the faculty have come out to show support. They've walked out and demonstrated, as well as others who've now begun a further sit-in at the university to show support for those who were arrested just for exercising their right to protest as well. We also touched on someone who attempted to disrupt that demonstration in our previous video, so please do check that out. Yeah, it was quite obvious that he was just there to stir trouble. He had his gate pass invalidated. He couldn't get in with his small group of pro-Zionists who were there to cause trouble, and then proceeded to create quite the scene. So do check that out if you've not done so already. And just another quick reminder, hit the thumbs up button, notification buttons, etc. And check out all of the perks on our membership tiers as well. For those of you who are joining us on the stream tonight, you're all very welcome. So let's have a quick look to show solidarity from Concordia and McGill University in Montreal, first of all.
And the seagull has a no! We want justice, you say how! And the seagull has a no! We want justice, you say how! And the seagull has a no! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free, free Palestine! Free, free, free Palestine! Free, free, free Palestine! Free, free, free Palestine! What do we want? Justice! I can't hear you! What do we want? Justice! What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? No! When do we want it? No! Please don't get it! Shut it down!
Well, we're seeing these sit-ins and shows of solidarity on university campuses all across the continent of America, in the USA, in Canada as well. Again, fantastic to see the youth movement as well during the whole resistance and protests towards Israel's occupation has been fantastic. The youth really do have their eyes open. They don't like to know that they've got so many decades ahead of them and what the state of the war could be as they see this situation escalate across the Middle East as a region, as well as being completely appalled with what's happening in Palestine itself.
We are all Palestinians! We are all Palestinians! We are all Palestinians! We are all Palestinians! We are all Palestinians!
Well, just 15 were arrested, although, you know, they shouldn't have been. Sorry, they were suspended. There were more arrests at the actual sit-in itself. But look at the turnout. Look at the turnout and show of solidarity for those 15 students. Incredible. There's you know, thousands of people there. Incredible scenes. Incredible scenes.
We are all Palestinians! Up with liberation! Up with liberation! Down, down with occupation! Down, down with occupation! Up with liberation! Up with liberation! Down, down with occupation! Down, down with occupation!
You notice in the song there they're singing up for reparations. That certainly should happen. Hopefully when we see this ceasefire come into an agreement. But Israel and the United States of America would owe a lot of reparations to the state of Palestine. That's for sure, when you look at the amount of infrastructure that's been destroyed, the amount of public buildings that have been destroyed, hospitals, schools, universities. I mean, you name it, you name it. You look across Gaza at the moment and it is a wasteland. It looks like Central Europe did at the end of the Second World War. Just whole areas razed to the ground, and that's going to need to be rebuilt. People are going to have homes to go to. What's been disgusting to see, what really makes my skin crawl, is the fact that Israel is already attempting to create real estate on the land that it's occupying, as it always has done over the decades. But the new areas in Rafah and southern Gaza that it's started to occupy over the last 6 months. They're putting out adverts. They're putting out adverts in magazines and on the internet for houses that they want to build on those sites, where they've just literally decimated and destroyed entire areas, you know, killing countless people and injuring even more with it. And they just can't wait to sell it off as real estate. I think it just makes it, it's just completely sick, you know.
With liberation! Up with liberation! Down with occupation! Down with occupation!
Great turnout, and like I said, that's continuing to spread all over the continent of America. Wonderful show of solidarity there. And speaking of solidarity, word of these sit-ins at Columbia University has reached the population in Gaza, as well as the support from the faculties and from people. See, it's this is why it's such a great show of solidarity, as more and more people show out. We're showing support for people who showed support for Palestine, and there's almost like, you know, more and more levels and layers going to it, just to try and re-emphasize the fact that, you know, protesters aren't going to be cowed or shirked by the mistreatment. We're only going to continue to use our voices more, to use our voices louder, and that's what's got to happen. So this is some video footage from Gaza itself, where some signs have been put up in English thanking those from Columbia University for showing solidarity, and I just thought that was particularly heartwarming to see that being sort of displayed and these communications being made this way.
رسالة شكر من داخل خيام النازحين إلى جامعة كولومبيا. هكذا عبر النازحين على بعض الخيام بهذه العبارات، عبارات شكر من داخل خيام النازحين في رفح.
And you've got to imagine, I mean, obviously we can only imagine, we've no idea what it must be like to be there in Gaza itself, but whilst these people don't even know where the next meal is coming from, whilst they're under constant persecution, while they're under constant bombardment, many people having lost several members of the families, with others injured and maimed in horrendous ways also, it's very easy, it would be very easy for them to feel isolated, to feel alone, that they don't have a voice, and that people are turning a blind eye across the world. But to see that they've heard about the amount of support being shown for them, and to make this gesture in a way that they have done is really heartwarming, because obviously Palestinians would have every right to criticise America, which they do, obviously, for the supply of arms, for the supply of aid to Israel, but they know the difference between what the American government's doing than what the population of America itself is doing, and they're thanking the people of America, not the Joe Bidens who continue to arm and fund Israel, and that's the difference, obviously, and they're aware of that.
هذه عبارات أخرى، في عبارات. طبعا أبو يوسف من كتب هذه العبارات، اشرح لنا أبو يوسف باختصار.
حاضر. طبعا قمت بكتابة هذه العبارات على خيامنا، لا نستطيع كتابة هذه.
Sorry about all the reverb there. That's not a fault. I think that's just actually on the video. I'm not sure why there's so much reverb on this part, but yeah, don't adjust your devices. That's part of the clip.
عبارات الشكر للطلبة التي ساندونا على جدران منازلنا، لأنها جدران مهدمة، جدران قصفت على رؤوسنا، فقمنا بكتابات على خيامنا التي تأوينا من الحر والشتاء.
So yeah, great to see. Very, very touching, very heartwarming. Of course. Going to move on to things back in the UK now. Just something that's happened recently within the media that is a bit disturbing and kind of goes to show how much influence Israeli lobbyists, etc., do have and how they're prepared to use that influence. So someone who's been an outspoken critic of Israel on one of the more mainstream broadcasters. They're not a news channel, of course. This is LBC I'm talking about, which stands for Leading Britain's Conversation. And one of the hosts really sort of stuck a neck out and has gone against other narratives to be a critic of Israel, and has, well, recently been suspended, although we're expected to believe that those two things are just a coincidence. Obviously, that doesn't appear to be the case. So, Sangeeta Miska is the presenter I'm talking about. I'm not sure if you're already familiar with her on LBC, but this is the kind of thing that is pretty obvious. Her criticism of Israel, and this is just one example of why people are suspecting that she's been suspended. Let's just put it that way.
What the Iranians, of course, have said is that this is a retaliatory strike after Israel struck its consulate in Syria. Now, we all know that the way diplomacy works is...
So, of course, this is going back to that incident a few weeks ago, as Sangeeta pointed out there. Israel attacked Syria. They attacked the Iranian consulate in Syria, but that is a clear breach of international law. You're not allowed to attack another nation's sovereign land. That's the way that works diplomatically. Even though it's a consulate in Syria, the land that the consulate is on itself legally is actually part of Iran. So if you attack the consulate, then legally, even though it's not geographically, you are directly attacking Iran. But he's denying this, as all Israeli spokes will ever do. Put up a pathetic performance, just shake their head and completely deny the existence of the facts being put to them. But Sangeeta Miska isn't having any of that and really does put the truth to him.
Consulates and embassies are considered sovereign territory of the government that is concerned. What Israel did by taking that action against Iran was escalate what is already an incredibly fragile situation.
Sangeeta, that's an outrageous framing of the reality.
It's not an outrageous framing. I've just been speaking to somebody who is a diplomat to Iran from the UK government. That's not an outrageous framing of it. What Israel did was strike what is considered in diplomatic circles the sovereign territory of Iran, whether we like it or not. No. And there was undoubtedly going to be a blowback.
They live in La La Land, don't they? They think that people came down with the last drop of rain. They assume that people are so naive that they will just buy into this propagandist narrative that he can have the neck of the gall to just sit there and shake his head. If you're going to blow up a consulate in a country and attack and kill people there, they think that that's not going to be recorded, that there's going to be no evidence of that, and that people should just take their word on it. What planet does this guy live on? It beggars belief, and it also goes to show how anyone who is born in Israel, is raised in Israel, or represents Israel in the media is so indoctrinated into pushing these narratives. But how they've got the balls to do so just staggers me every time I see it. You know, we're used to Tory MPs lying on the media. We're used to Keir Starmer lying on the news rounds. But this is almost a whole other level. when we're talking about things that involve warfare.
So did Israel game out what was going to happen next?
Firstly, I'm not going to speak directly to that strike. What I can say definitively, and this is why it's outrageous, I can say definitively is that wasn't an embassy, it wasn't a consulate, it wasn't any type of diplomatic mission.
It's been widely
an
reported as that.
outfit because that's what Iran says. Because that's what Iran says. So would you like to copy and paste?
Are you suggesting every single news organisation?
It's been verified independently, not just backed up by Iran. And of course, it happened in Syria. Geographically, obviously, you have to differentiate legally and geographically in this case. But again, that he thinks that people are going to just buy into what he says. No chance. So there's this massive campaign at the moment to get Sangeeta reinstated as a presenter on LBC. Obviously, it's very fair to say that it's been heavily implied that Israeli lobbyists had a hand in her recent suspension. There's a petition that's been launched to get her reinstated as well. If you want to take part in that petition, do check it out online. I do have to say, in terms of how I feel about your average LBC presenter, I can't say I hold a great amount of affection for too many of them, but Sangeeta Miska was certainly one of the better ones, definitely where it comes to holding Israeli spokes to account, as you saw in this example here. But in other cases, we're just seeing typical neoliberal levels of presenting, which is unfortunate. But Sangeeta Miska is kind of the exception to that in terms of LBC hosts, and I think that she certainly should be reinstated. So please do check out that petition as well if you can. And it's also desperate to see this kind of censorship going on. You know, Palestinian voices will be heard, the truth will be heard, despite the efforts of their spokes. But that's just embarrassing. That's just embarrassing from this representative here. Sorry, I'm just going to... Avi Hyman, is that his name? Yeah. Just as bad as David Mensa or any of the other aforementioned spokes. Okay, so I'm going to move on to something else now, just another clip that I came across. This is from TikTok that I've seen over the weekend, but just something else that is worth pointing out.
The pro-Palestine people are actually worse than the BLM people were.
So this is speaking of pathetic examples, this I'm not sure if they're actually a social media influencer, pro-Israeli Zionist, is trying to criticize people who attend marches who call for a ceasefire, pro-Palestinians, but this TikToker sort of really calls them out, as we hear more of the same bullshit just coming from Zionists.
Which I didn't even know that was possible. If you're so fond of a place, I suggest you leave America and you go there and you...
Where do you...
So we've heard this before. We've heard this before from the far right and from Zionists. It's even been put on comments that are on threads that I've been participating in on social media as well. But you'll hear them say, if you like Palestine so much, if you love Gaza so much, why don't you just go there? Someone even once said, why don't you go to the airport, get on a plane and fly to Palestine, completely not realising that there aren't any airports left in the country because they all got decimated years ago by Israel, of course. But this, if you love it so much, why don't you go and live there thing. I'm sure that you've probably come across it yourselves, to those of you who are watching. But I think that this is a fine response to that pathetic narrative, as you're going to see from this guy here.
I want them to go, Emily. Do you think it still looks like this? There's nothing left. They destroyed it all. They can't just move back in as if they were on a staycation waiting for their house to be fumigated. I know this is very hard for you to conceptualize in your cute little white aesthetic house in Los Angeles, but guess what? If your house was blown up along with everything else in the fucking area, you wouldn't have a place to go home to either. Do you think you can just girl boss your way out of the rubble? Find a surviving Starbucks nearby? There is nothing left. You want them to go back to somewhere that doesn't exist, girl. You are a grown-ass woman crying about little bitty inconveniences. This world is bigger than you. Grow up. You are not the main character. If you aren't comfortable with people expressing their First Amendment right, then I suggest you leave. Because at this point in time, you're the least American person here.
Yeah, fair point. Fair point. Land of the free, supposedly, but as soon as you call for people to be free, you'll hear far-right, idiotic narratives such as the one that she was making. So well pointed out there. So yeah, that's pretty much it from the latest on Gaza and the protests. I could have put twice as many clips on, to be honest. There's been a lot going around social media recently, but hope you're happy with that selection. Let us know in the chat or in the comments as well. Don't forget, especially if you've taken part in any of the marches or demonstrations recently. Also, there's just one more demo we're going to take a look at. This isn't pertaining to Palestine or Gaza, but a protest against corruption in New York City, against the mayor there, and there was some arrests as well as people tried to point out this awful corruption that's happening in New York City. But again, the police being heavy-handed and what is legitimate criticism being silenced with arrest yet again in the USA.
You have to tell him why he's being arrested. You can't just arrest him.
We spent 25 hours in jail after protesting Mayor Eric Adams.
Where are you going to stand up for working New Yorkers?
The amount of time that we spent behind bars was completely unusual for the kind of action that we did. The only reason that we were held overnight and not told our charges was because we went after the mayor himself.
In fact, the NYPD broke their own protocol by holding us overnight instead of giving us a desk appearance ticket and letting us go that same day.
You have to explain to me now because you're putting cuffs on me right now. You can't explain to me at the station. You have to explain to me when you're arrested.
During the arrest process, NYPD told us explicitly that they didn't know why we were being arrested, but that they had been directed to do so by a member of the mayor's staff.
Am I detained? We're trying to figure it out.
We want a liberal future for New York. We were outside for 10 minutes before he sent cops on us to arrest us in retribution for embarrassing him.
The slap test was completely bogus charges just because they can, and that's what happens when you put bullies in power.
We need a different mayor. Like, this guy sucks.
Like a new fucking mayor.
On top of being absolutely corrupt, basically working for the government of Turkey, having a legitimate sexual assault case against him, torching our city. He's also just like a weird and unsettling guy who doesn't make sense when he speaks, and he puts protesters behind bars in retribution. Fuck Eric Adams.
Fuck Eric Adams.
The mayor is having us arrested for interrupting his speech because we want a livable future in New York City. He gutted New York's Green New Deal by Law 97 so the rich could get richer.
And just for good measure, here's a video of our friend yelling at Eric even after we had disrupted.
You're one of the worst mayors in New York City. You already talk about project for the rich.
Anyways, we're going to keep fighting to make New York City a better place and to end fossil fuels, and you should too.
What do we need? A new mayor! When do we need it? Now!
Great stuff, great stuff. It's always great to see people speaking truth directly to power, and when they interrupt these meetings, in this case New York City Mayor Eric Adams, it really does remind them that the people are aware of what's going on and that we won't tolerate it. So I just quickly wanted to show that to you as well, in case you weren't aware of that animosity that's happening in New York City against the mayor Eric Adams, who, as you pointed out, also has some really crappy policies in terms of environmental protection, etc. He's part of the. He's fallen to the corrupt lobbyists again. Right, we're going to go just a quick skim through another article now. This is something I've wanted to point out for a while. This article's a few days old or so, but just didn't get around to making a video about it this week. But keep an eye out for new content coming to you during the week, of course. So we just go back to the articles. So you're all familiar with Elon Musk, of course, I'm sure. But this is just crazy. Yeah, those of you who are regular viewers of the channel probably know I don't really have a great amount of affection for Elon Musk as a person, as a capitalist. He's also a racist, and he's just an awful piece of work. He's asking for a $56 billion bonus and a pay deal for Elon Musk. He's put this to the shareholders. Now, he's almost run any business that he's had his hands on into the ground, at the same time as trying to convince people that he's some sort of scientific, technical genius, which he isn't. He's a capitalist, corporate buyout specialist, basically. And he's a hype merchant. He promises his shareholders that he's going to bring them the future, but the technology just isn't there. But somehow, despite Tesla stock being pretty much in free fall at the moment, he's asking to be rewarded with the biggest pay deal in corporate American history, worth $56 billion. That's almost £45 billion. So the electrical vehicle company is asking shareholders to vote on its chief executive's record-breaking pay that was set in 2019. However, the deal was rejected by a US judge in January, who described it as an unfathomable sum. Some of his recent investments obviously haven't gone the way he would have liked. Twitter is a great example. I refuse to call it X just because, like I said, I don't really have any affection whatsoever for Elon Musk. I can see past the hype. I can see past all of his BS as well. But I'm not going to go into that too much. Just how he expects the shareholders from Tesla to try and cover his shortcomings. So he was basically forced into buying Twitter after what he thought was jokingly pretended that he was going to buy it to try and manipulate the stock price, let's put it that way, and make an advantage. However, he unwittingly entered into a legally binding agreement, which meant he then had to buy the company for several times its market value. Twitter, as a business, as an app, generally makes losses. It doesn't really profit very much. The most it's profited in a single financial year was $1 billion, and Musk threw $40 billion at Twitter. That's how much he ended up having to buy it for. So even if he ran it as well as its most successful ever year, he'd have to do so and sustain that for 40 years just to break even. However, that's not happened. Profits are down. Things he's said, things he's done, obviously been very controversial. And he's attacked advertisers who have walked away from Twitter. I'm sure you've probably seen clips from that strange performance where he tried to accuse companies of blackmailing him with money, which is just basically a crappy excuse for advertisers walking away for legitimate reasons. So he's trying to cover his losses there as well as make a bit more. $56 billion. So Tesla's currently valued at just over $500 billion, according to data, though a lot of people say that it's the most overvalued blue chip stock in the world. And yeah, that could certainly be the case. It's heading on a downward spiral at the moment in terms of value on the stock market. Tesla isn't, Musk isn't a tech guy. He bought the former owners out. He made them sign a declaration which basically handed over the creative rights to Musk, that he could claim to be the engineering genius that he isn't. Made them sign an NDA. But as I said, I'm not going to go on about his shortcomings too much. There's another YouTuber called Thunderfoot who I suggest you check out if you want to know more about the shortcomings of Elon Musk in terms of Tesla, his tech companies, the Hyperloop as well, for example, SpaceX also. They're just hype projects. He's pretending to sell people a future, but he just wants the money to inflate the stock price. That's pretty much it. He's not the genius that his fans think he is. He's not any kind of genius at all, really. The only thing he seems to be good at is convincing his fanboys to keep handing the money over. So just a couple of points from this article. So Delaware-based judge Kathleen McCormick said the pay deal was unfair to shareholders. She found Tesla directors who negotiated the deal were perhaps starry-eyed due to Mr. Musk's superstar appeal and did not fully inform shareholders. Excuse me one sec. I just need a drink. Yeah. The decision outraged Mr. Musk, who subsequently threatened to move Tesla's headquarters from Delaware to Texas. An atypical man-child move as far as Musk's concerned there. I'm sure you'll agree. On Monday, Tesla filed paperwork asking shareholders to approve that move and sign off on the 2018 pay package again. Board Chair Robin Denham wrote in a letter included in the regulatory filing that Elon has not been paid for any of his work for Tesla for the past 6 years. That strikes us and the many stockholders whom we have already heard as fundamentally unfair. That's strictly not true. In order to pay for the buyout of Twitter, he did have to sell some of his Tesla stock, so he did actually get paid for that. He just chose to immediately spend it on an overpriced social media app, which wasn't a great investment. Yeah. If it's legally advisable, we suggest simply rejecting the original 2018 package to a new shareholder vote. But that's a lot of money, you know, and this attitude that billionaires have, £56 billion, when you look at how much poverty there is, the wealth gap, the increasing difference in wages between a standard worker and a CEO, for example. They're at record levels again. Musk is also trying to recover his reputation after a turbulent year. Tesla had to recall cars over safety concerns as well. Yeah, that's another thing that's tanked the stock price. Mr. Musk was caught up in an anti-Semitic conspiracy row and had repeated problems with Twitter, his social media platform. Yeah, I'm not calling it X. And those are you aren't familiar with that, this video that came out, which I think he shared on his own personal Twitter profile, as well as making a positive comment about it, essentially was a right-wing promo video which showed a racist father trying to teach his son how he should attack a group of Jewish people, which is just utterly disgusting. That's not just the first or the last story surrounding Elon Musk concerning racism that I'm sure you'll ever hear. Apparently has quite the reputation for it. His parents were blood diamond miners in apartheid South Africa. He's not a rags to rich story, despite the fact that he tries to say that he got where he is by putting in hours upon hours of good work. That's not true. The original coding that he wrote for PayPal was trashed. Other people had to come in and completely fix that. He had a large amount of financial support from his parents. He didn't just start from nothing, then end up a billionaire. But regardless, as the article says, Bloomberg and Forbes estimate Musk's net worth to be between 198 billion and 220 billion in November in 2023, making him the richest person in the world. However, I think he currently sits in third behind Jeff Bezos and the owner of Louis Vuitton, who's just been declared the richest person in the world. But these amounts of money are disgusting. You know, more money than an individual would be able to spend in several lifetimes. The amount of hubris, the amount of entitlement is unbelievable when you look at the problems in our society. These have been put to Musk as well, and as usual, he can't help himself in his man-child fashion. For example, people have pointed out how just a fraction of his wealth would be able to financially support so many people. He'd basically be able to eradicate poverty in African countries, for example. And then he's gone out and done a poll asking Twitter followers, should I do this? And then when the poll overwhelmingly says that he should, he just ignores it anyway. And he plays these games on social media with these polls and other things. He's just an absolute, piece of crap, really. So we'll see what happens with that. Obviously, I hope that gets rejected. $56 billion, what a disgusting amount of money. But I'm going to show you, something a bit more light-hearted now. Let's try and just cheer ourselves up a little as I get slightly riled by Elon Musk. This is the latest from comedian Matt Green. This is a video he put out during the week concerning Rishi Sunak and the Rwanda bill. For those of you who aren't familiar with him, do check him out. Otherwise, I'm sure regular viewers of the live stream will be familiar with Matt already. This is latest vid.
Do you know what? I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed. Not tetchy. Last week, Labour peers, who are not in a majority, contrived to use every trick in the book to delay the safety of Rwanda bill. Tricks like outlining practical issues, pointing out legal problems, and ridiculing a clearly unworkable and unaffordable plan. But enough is enough. No more delays, right? Parliament will sit there tonight and vote no matter how late it gets. And it could go after midnight, which is well after my bedtime. So that shows you exactly how seriously I am taking this. These flights are going to Rwanda. No ifs, no buts. But if they try and block them again, I will get really tetchy. Not tetchy. We are going to dispense with this undeliverable... we are going to deliver this indispensable deterrent. Because if being hypothetically sent somewhere that we've declared legally safe isn't a deterrent for someone fleeing for their life, then I don't know what is. Seriously, this is my only idea. And yes, I know it was originally thrown out as a distraction from the Sue Gray report, but it's now somehow turned into a combination of the Holy Grail and Chekhov's gun, and I must make it happen. To deal with any legal issues, we've identified 150 judges who can process claims. They were just going to be wasting their time on things like fraud and murder, so now we can easily move them over to this, the most important issue facing my career, my party, my country, the country. We've already booked planes and hundreds of highly trained escorts. We did initially book some highly trained escorts of a different type, but luckily we have plenty of MPs who are very experienced at that sort of thing. We are ready. Plans are in place. No foreign court will stop us. And yes, I know that makes me sound like a crap Bond villain, but I think I sound cool and menacing, like a toddler wearing a Darth Vader mask. This doesn't rely on one flight. It relies on a regular rhythm, a drumbeat of many flights over the summer and beyond until the boats stop, or Labour comes to power, whichever is sooner. It'll be the Labour one.
While he might be right, that remains to be seen. That's the latest from Matt Green, great comedian there. And yeah, Rishi Sunak's flagship Rwanda policy, going back to 2019, obviously the only thing that we're really standing on going into the general election was Brexit and HS2. Neither of those have worked out particularly well, so they can't sit and gloat about the successes of those. They've come up with this awful xenophobic bullshit policy, as though the state of the country rests on this, rests on a small amount of migrants that Sunak's willing to waste so much money on, pretending that that's how he's turning the country around. However, he's not even found himself an airline that is prepared to fly people to Rwanda, because, as I'm sure we're all aware, despite the fact that Rishi Sunak has declared that it would be a safe country for them, that is, of course, entirely not the case. And it's just utterly ludicrous, the amount of billions that are being put into this. And he made that bet recently on air with Piers Morgan. What was it, the very crude £1,000 bet that he'd be getting the flights off soon. Stop the boats and start the flights seems to be his latest clarion call. However, how he's going to achieve that when it's been pointed out that they don't even have an airline is just utterly ridiculous. These Tories are completely deluded, and this policy is a massive reflection of that. I'm sure you'll agree. So that's the latest from Matt Green there. It's going to head back to the lounge as bring the stream to a close for this week. Been on for over 2 hours now. There was quite a bit to get through, so thanks to those of you who've stuck it out with us here on the My Left Eye live stream. Thanks a lot for your continued support and for your comments as well. Wonder Gupta, Phil McCracken, Leftist Pragues, Odin Allfather, thanks a lot for your comments as well. Great to see you as always. If you're watching on a replay, don't forget to let us know your thoughts about the topics in hand during the live stream within the comments section. And just a final reminder, if you've not done so yet, hit the thumbs up button, notification bell, and please do check out some of our longer form content as well. And again, if you're watching back, please do consider supporting the channel by hitting super thanks or going to the Buy Me a Coffee page. Links are in the description of this video and for the channel as well. So there's quite a bit to get through on the stream. There were actually a few other stories as well that I wanted to put in, but alas, we've already gone over 2 hours as it was. I might be saving those other articles and stories for videos during the week, so please do keep an eye out. Yeah, and we'll be back next week, of course, returning to the usual time of 7 PM for the Sunday live streams. Don't forget to look out for PMQ's live stream as well this coming Wednesday. see what the latest is in the House of Commons. And yeah, for members, keep your eyes out for new and upcoming exclusive live streams as well, depending on which package you're on. We're either going to have some exclusive live streams or exclusive videos coming up as well. And thanks a lot for your amazing support, you wonderful people. Thanks and solidarity as always. Wondergupta, yeah, you're very welcome for the update. Solidarity to you. Happy Socialist Sunday to everybody who's listening. We hope that you'll be back with us again next week. Also, who knows what could happen in the next 7 days. A week's a long time in politics, as they always say. But for now, that's just about it from me, your host, Lefty. Thanks again for joining us, and I will see you next time. Take care of yourselves, everyone. We'll be seeing you soon.